All right, everyone, we're back. What we have here is my ground floor plan, and what I'm doing is I'm going to go back over dimensions, sort of conceptually, like how they, not necessarily how they work, but what they're used for, how we use dimensions. So, if you, those of you who have gone this far, you'll notice that I've got a rectangle here that says these are from my interior wall dimensions. That this rectangle is where my exterior windows and doors are located, and that this is for my overall exterior dimensions. Now, when all this information is put up, or when this information is put on the drawing, we also have to think about in what order the trades are going to be engaging in various things. And typically speaking, it's going to be your framers that come in first, and those are the guys that actually put up the walls. That's what these dimensions are primarily for. So they need to know where the walls are, and for the exterior walls, they need to know where windows are located. So even though I'll be placing some dimensions along these points here, which are technically where the brick is, it's also the opening where the door is going to go. So that's my rationale behind that. But I'm going to start by placing a few dimensions, and I'm going to place my overall exterior dimensions first. So I'm on my dimension layer, go to my dimension tool, and I want to pick this point here. So it's not the innermost corner, but it's the second to the inside. So that's my point that I'm actually dimensioning. I'm going to come all the way to the other side. Remember, this is come to the other side of the building because this is my overall dimension. So that is the overall dimension for this part of the building, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to left click on that last line. That's sort of my alignment point there. Now I've got this one jog over here, and I need to include that, but you notice we have the transition between brick along the back and wood siding along the back. Well, we're still dimensioning the second from the inside. So it's going to be the outside edge of framing is what we're dimensioning. So place my dimension. I'm going from this corner to this corner. Now, if I drag vertically, which I'm going to have to do anyway, because I have to drag vertically to get this dimension up here, but I need to drag horizontally to get that dimension. So that's 4'5". It's kind of an odd dimension, but it is what it is. I now need to dimension those same points again, the exterior face of framing, except this time I'm going to drag upwards because I need that point. There we go. And now I dimension line along this entire back edge. Now remember, this is our overall dimensions. We're going to come back and get all the other in-betweens here in a few minutes. So these are my overall dimensions. These dimensions establish what the perimeter shape of the building looks like. And this is really handy information, not only for the framers, but this information gets coordinated with the structural people when they put the foundation down. We would have to deal with the structural engineer, hand them our backgrounds, they would draw up a structural foundation plan. All that stuff gets done, all that stuff gets figured out. Okay, so here we are, we have our overall conditions met. Now what we need to do is, because we've established a relationship between all these walls, for example, we know that this wall is 6 feet 11 inches away from this wall. That's what distances away from each other so that relationships between various elements can be determined. Okay, we're going to go back. I'm going to come all the way down here at the bottom. Come on. Come down to the bottom. So I'm going to place another dimension and zoom in. So same exterior edge of framing. And even though I'm clicking here, which is technically a corner of brick, you notice it aligns up with the opening that we need for the door. And you'll notice we have this behavior going on. Whichever direction that you drag is whichever direction we're going to dimension. We'll come back to this in a minute, but I also want to remind you of what I said in the previous video. The order in which you place these points dictates what side the text is going to be on. Let me go through that one again. I go to place my dimension. If I start at the bottom and I go up, then my text is going to be on the top. So think of sort of a start, finish, end. You start, you start your dimension with your first point. You finish your dimension with the second point. And if you were to continue a line between point 1 and point 2, it's that side which the text is going to be on, and that's your end point. So let me show this from the opposite direction. If I start at the door opening and then click on the framing, you'll notice that my 1'3" dimension is on the other side of my dimension line. Again, I'm fairly certain that this is intentional on the part of Autodesk. But I want these dimensions to be on the outside. Or do I? Yes, I want them to be on the outside. And some of this just has everything to do with how something's going to read when all is said and done. Okay, door opening, which in this case I can actually use the brick opening. It's not going to hurt anything. It still indicates that there's an opening for the door. And even though I'm going to come back, left click, I still want to end here with the face of framing. Because even though it looks like I'm dimensioning the brick at this location, I'm not. I'm actually dimensioning my opening. Okay? So now I've got another opening that I need to create over here. Now we're pulling these dimensions kind of far away. It is what it is. Exterior doors, they don't always get dimension, but I'm going to show this one anyway. It's going to look a little funny just because of how I've placed the door. And that is the edge of my door here is in alignment with the edge of the brick. They'll do things like that quite a bit. So you have this 6-inch dimension. It looks like I'm dimensioning from the edge of the framing to the edge of the brick. In a sense, I am, but what I'm actually doing is I'm saying, no, this is the opening in this wall over here for the door. That's what I'm actually dimensioning. And when I go to place this next dimension, because remember, all this lines up, so I'm actually dimensioning the opening for the, remember, I'm dimensioning the opening for the door. So I come over here, there's opening for the door, pull him over, and you see how that 3'2" and that 6-inch are really kind of crowded around one another? I'm going to use my grips, and I'm just going to swing these points back around. And again, it looks like I'm dimensioning to the brick. I'm not. I'm dimensioning to the door opening. So there we go. So there it is. Now I come back, place into the dimension, door opening to outside face of framing, and then I come up. There we go. So you can see now that I've got a little more control over what side of the dimension that my text goes on. I have some more control over how things read. So I have less need for leaders now than I did before. Okay, I have no openings on this side, so I don't need to dimension any doors or windows, but I've got lots of windows over on this side, so I'm going to dimension those. Outside face framing, window opening. Now one of the neat little tricks that you can do, remember how the space bar is always interpreted as an enter. AutoCAD remembers the last command that you created, so if you push return, you're instantly going to be in the previous command, in this case, placing a linear dimension. But you notice down here at the bottom where it says, I can select an object if I press return. Well, what do I mean select an object when I place a dimension? Well, if I press return, all I have to do is click on this line that runs the length of my window, and that's the length of my window. That's the size of my window. Now this all depends on how accurate you've drawn this. So I'm going to press return a second time, and select this line that's in between my windows. And press return to enter another dimension, press return to dimension an object, and here's another line for the windows. Now this is one of those things that can really speed up a lot of what you're doing, but again, it all depends on how accurately you've drawn your information. Press return twice, grab another line for a window. And you can see as I hover over that line, it wants to snap to the midpoint. That's how I know all this information is lined up. And I just work all my way across. Now I'll come back and I'll explain this here in a little bit. Oh, I'd actually do a dimension. I don't want to press return and select an object because I actually need to manually specify points because I'm not grabbing the endpoint, the two different endpoints of the same line. Okay. So what I see a lot of people doing this. I'm going to delete this to hopefully it'll filter this out and it'll make some sense. So hang on. I see a lot of people dimension their windows like this. Now, it's great that you're telling me that the window itself is 5'8". That's not a problem. The problem is where on the wall that this window fits in does that 5'8" belong? That's what the other dimensions are for. I need to know that that 5'8" is 2'4" off the exterior corner of that wall. So now I've established a relationship between this 5'8" window and the end of this wall. This is what's known as your dimensions. You're establishing a relationship between objects. Having a single dimension that says, here's a 5'8" window is only part of the information that you need. Any contractor is going to come back and say, you didn't do it right. So now I need to know how far apart these windows are. So that's why this other dimension comes in and says these two windows are 5'8" apart. So if I put every single dimension together, these dimensions tell me start at this corner of the building, you go 2'4", and then there's a 5'8" window. Then you go another 5'8", and there's a 3-foot window. Then you go 10'6", and there's a 2-foot window. And then you go 4'10", there's another 2-foot window, and then it's 3'2" to the other end of this wall. That's what all these dimensions do. You're telling a story. Okay. So hopefully that helps, because I know a lot of you guys are still having questions on how to do dimensioning. Well, that's how you do dimensioning. Now, what we still don't have is a relationship from one wall to another wall. Now, I don't have a whole lot of that happening over here, but I've got a lot of interior walls to dimension along this back edge. So one of the things I'm going to do, and I've got to do this a couple different ways, I'm going to place dimensions indicating the thickness of the outside walls. And that's going to go right there on this innermost red dashed line. And again, this is one of those things that helps us establish relationships between things. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we start at 3'2", and I have a 6-inch thick wall. That's what this 6-inch dimension starts off telling us. You start at the edge and you go 6 inches, and that's the inside edge. So now what I'm going to do is place a dimension from here, and I'm going to come across to this other interior wall. So now this dimension string is telling us a different story. You start at the outside edge, you go 6 inches to the inside edge. You then go 7'5", and there's another wall. That's what these dimensions say. 7'5", and then there is a 7-inch wall. And then after those 7 inches, you go 5 feet, and at the end of that 5 feet is a 5-inch wall. So think of it as words in a paragraph. One thing leads to another, leads to another. After that 5-inch wall, you go 12'7" before you run into the next wall. And that wall is 5 inches. Now you'll notice that when I place this dimension, instead of starting on the left and going right, because that's the dimension that I'm moving when I'm placing my dimensions, I actually went and clicked from the right and to the left. That was so I wanted the 5-inch dimension on the left-hand side of the dimension. I'll show you what'll happen if I do this the other way. So let me erase that. Place a dimension I'm going to start at the left, I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going to place that places my 5-inch dimension text on the right-hand side of my text, or of my dimension. So that when I come by to dimension the depth of this closet, well, that 5 inches is now going to be in the way of reading my 2-foot dimension. That's the reason why I placed that dimension. Whoop. No, stop. Sometimes my fingers are too fast for me. That's why I placed the dimension starting from the right and going to the left. It was so that my dimension text would be on the left side of my dimension. That just reads better. But I don't want to do the same on this side. I want my dimension text on the right-hand side of my dimension here, just like I did over on this side. Pan a little bit further. And even though I said that we didn't have to do it on the apartment project, we're going to do it on this project. I want dimensions running all the way across, at least for these outside pieces here. And I'll place another 6-inch dimension right here. There we go. So each one of these dimension strings is telling a story. The outermost string of dimensions, that's showing us the rough shape and the rough size of the building. We go the next line in, and that shows us what are the holes in the exterior walls, which is doors and windows. The next dimension string in is showing us where are the other walls inside the building when we connect them up to the walls that run on the outside of the building. So hopefully every single one of these make a little more sense now. And because I don't have to think, each dimension string is telling its own unique story. So again, you start with 3'2", and then you have a 2-foot window, and then 4'10", and there's another 2-foot window, and 10'6", and there's a 3-foot window. I don't have to worry about interior walls in this middle dimension string, because the middle dimension string is just telling me where the penetrations are in my exterior envelope. This innermost line of dimension strings tells me the thickness of every bit of wall, but it doesn't tell me anything about my doors and windows in my perimeter wall, because that's not the function of this dimension string. If you guys have ever seen a framing diagram, this makes a little more sense, because the very first things that they do when they put up a house is they put up the perimeter walls. Okay, now you'll notice I have another couple of little lines right here. Now, it just so happens I've got a number of things that are happening on the inside of my floor plan that I need some additional dimensions to help figure this out. You know what? I'm going to change this door. This door is just bothering me. I want it to be a barn sliding door. There we go. Get back in there. You know what? Instead of a barn slider, make it just a regular slider. Put some jams on it. There we go. Okay. Just because it was a door swing, I didn't want the door swing interfering with the dining room table. Not that it really matters. I don't see a lot of people getting in and out of a storage closet or a linen closet like that when they're trying to eat, but it's just a little aesthetic thing. Okay, I have some additional dimensions. Why do I need these dimensions? Well, I need to establish where this wall is in relation to the exterior envelope. I also need to establish where this wall is in relation to the exterior envelope, because it just so happens that this wall runs all the way through here. So that it actually works in my favor. I can put a single dimension string through here and pick up a lot of information. So, because I already have my wall thickness, I can start here. So I know that's 4 feet. And then going to place another dimension for my wall thickness to say, hey, there's a 5-inch wall here. I got to zoom in because that didn't sit right. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to place another dimension. we go. It's another 4 foot there. Now these are still kind of close, but it's readable, so I'm not going to really worry about that. But because it is readable, I'm going to run my dimension string in this direction because I've got to keep going with even more dimensions. I need to place a dimension here because I need to cross that hallway. And I want to make sure that that's actually correct. Okay. I need to dimension my column thickness. So there's my column thickness. That might not be as pretty as I would like. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to move that. I need to dimension the depth of my powder room. Right. So you can see it now. That 1 foot and that 3 foot are just clashing horribly. But if it's interfering with 3 foot, it's going to interfere with 3 foot 3. You can kind of tell just by looking at it. So once again, I just hover my mouse over the blue dot, say move with the leader, and I'm just going to move that 1 foot dimension just a little bit, just so it clears the space there. That's all I'm going to do. I'll place another dimension, except this time it's going to be the thickness of this wall. And now I'm going to come for the end point of that wall, and I'm going to go all the way across until it intersects here. 9 foot 11. And here's where things get a little weird. Technically speaking, I could stop right now because this line aligns here. I don't really have a dimension that reinforces that, so I'm going to keep going with my dimensions. From here to here is another 6 inches. You know what? Let's have that go the other way. Six inches. From here to here is 3 foot 6. And I'm not really going to worry. This is where things really start getting weird. You know what? Let's pull those out. I'm going to call that done. Now to show that, to really show that this wall lines up with this wall, I'm going to draw a line, and it's not going to touch. I just want to mimic the extension line on this dimension going in both directions so that the contractor knows, oh, okay, this stuff lines up. Simple. I'm not going to worry about dimensioning my fireplace. I'm just not going to do it. Okay. Now I have another dash line, again on the non-plot layer, going this direction because I need some more dimensions this way. I have a few that need to be picked up. I'm not quite so worried about what's happening with these walls up here. I've got these walls, I should say, these walls, the plumbing wall, the wall between the plumbing and the guest suite, and the walls for the closets. What I don't have are any of the vertical walls running through here. That's what the string is going to pick up. I also don't have the thickness of this little piece right here. So I'm going to get that too. Place a dimension. Now what I'm doing that's a little bit differently is I'm still going to start with the thickness of this wall. Even though it's a duplicate, I'm still going to put it there. And then I'm going to place a dimension from here to here, because I'm dimensioning the thickness of the wall that this door is sitting in. This is not dimensioning the door, this is dimensioning the wall. I'm then going to go from here across to this corner, and then get my wall thickness. Then I'm going to get here, and then my 1 foot dimension there. Now the only thing I'm really missing are a few little dimensions to pick up some odds and ends. For example, I need to know that this is 5 inches. I also need to know That that's 5 inches, and it's not as pretty as I would like, but it is what it is. Because we've said, hey, here's this 1 foot right here, and we've said, hey, here's this 1 foot right here. That gives us all the information we need after having it tied back to some other points that have been determined, and we know what the relationships are between all these different walls. Now I can use this information to build pretty much everything I've got shown here. What am I missing? I'm missing a 1 foot dimension right here, which is going to be a weird place to put it. Sometimes dimensions just have to go where they have to go. I don't like doing dimensions like this where I've got 6 inches that are also right there with a 1 foot, or having to show doubles between 5 inches and then 1 foot that's right on the other side of the column. Sometimes it's just the best way to show something if there's too much information all crammed together to make sense of it all. All right, if you guys need help, you know where to find me. If you need even more help, I hope you can help. But this is another one of those things where putting your heads together and finding someone else that knows what they're doing, and have a little study group or whatnot, it's going to go a long way. So I'm going to save my file. I'm going to close everything up. All right, guys, that's it. I will see you in class.